Welcome to the Cohesion Podcast. Before we dive in, let me tell you about Simpler, the AI-powered employee experience platform that's revolutionizing internal communications. Simpler helps you build a vibrant company culture, transform your digital workplace, and boost employee productivity. Want to see how Simpler can elevate your employee experience? Visit simpler.com/cohesion to download our free guide on creating an engaging digital workspace.
Hey everybody, I'm Carolyn Clark. I'm the Vice President of Internal Communications and Employee Experience at Simpler. I am talking to Sarah Kaplan today. I am so excited, Sarah, to have you on our podcast. Sarah is the Director of Internal Communication for Smarsh, and we're going to hear all about what Smarsh is and her role there. And one of the reasons we wanted to have Sarah on is because her journey has not been the typical comms path. She went from performing opera, which we're going to get into a little bit, to performing organizational transformation. And gosh, I think she probably makes both look very easy. We're going to talk about building a comms function from scratch, navigating leadership transitions, and we're going to touch on art and the emergence of art with communications, because I also come from a creative background, Sarah, and I feel like they go hand in hand from time to time. So welcome to the podcast, Sarah. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
These are always the fun moments where we get into the convo. So I want to start with some icebreakers for you. We did not prepare you for these, so feel free to skip them if you don't love them. Coffee or tea when you start your day?
Coffee for sure. I'm a little bit obsessed. I really like good coffee. I'm in the Pacific Northwest right now. And so I've, over the years, developed a bit of coffee snobbery, but I figure if there's one thing I'm going to let myself enjoy, it's going to be coffee.
Oh, I love that. I'm a tea gal myself, but I also have a very similar snobbery when it comes to the tea that I drink.
Sometimes it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so when you're preparing for a big moment, do you listen to a pump up playlist or do you do a deep breathing exercise? What's your go-to?
It's a good question. It's a little bit of both. It depends on how I'm feeling. Sometimes my husband has made me a playlist that is like a swag playlist. And so I listen to that when I need a couple of tracks to get me going. And then it depends if I'm feeling a little bit anxious about a moment. I might choose a song that's a little more calm that I can breathe to and just sort of have a settling moment before I get into what I'm doing.
I like that. Okay. When you're writing, which I know whether you're writing, maybe it's a big communication or you're writing a keynote for someone or working on that, do you need to do it in silence or do you do it with that pump up music behind you? Which one?
It also depends. Some days I really need like a jam. And so especially in the afternoons when you hit that like afternoon slump, I'll get my iced coffee and I'll put on my headphones and I'll listen to something that really gets me moving. And then I'm like, okay, right for the CEO, go. But sometimes I do get quiet, or sometimes I go towards, because I do have a classical music background, I might go towards something a little more mellow and classical. I also have gotten into lo-fi beats lately.
Oh my God, me too.
That kind of gets going. It gives me the groove.
Yes.
So I guess my answer then would be, music, usually music.
Yeah, I love that. And I also am a classical girly. So if I'm not listening to traditional classical, I'm listening to like classical pop music replays, so. But okay, so you mentioned your art background. Before we get into kind of how you got into comms and all of that, tell me a little bit about your opera background and how it ties to comms and what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I grew up wanting to be an opera singer, and I went to school for voice performance. And I was at the time at least cautious enough that I was like, okay, I'm going to get a liberal arts degree so that I've got some other things going on in case this doesn't work out. And it ultimately didn't work out. It wasn't the path that I wanted for my overall career and lifestyle. But through opera, through performing, it kind of gave me, like, it's all about storytelling, right? It's about storytelling for your audience. And in performing arts, a lot of times the message that you have isn't anything new, right? Like the opera has been done before. You have to find ways to constantly be new and engaging with your audience. And you also have to pivot in real time. You have to work with the people who are in your scene or on stage with you or the specific director. And a lot of those skills, I think, have helped translate into the work that I do now, right? With storytelling, connecting with people, being able to move and be quick on your feet and adapt. So even though it wasn't a linear career progression for me, it definitely feels like it makes sense in the whole picture.
Just the way you described it makes sense, because especially from the very beginning, because one of the things that I know about opera, but you tell me if I'm wrong, is you have to, as you said, you're often singing the same lyrics that have been sung for, in some cases, 100 years, and you
Centuries.
are, yeah, for centuries, and you have to emote, right? You have to figure out the emotion that comes through, which happens a lot in our communication. I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
we have an advantage in writing something emotional, but often we're having to take something that is maybe basic and kind of bring the emotion to it. So I could see how that ties really closely together. Do you
Yeah.
still perform?
Not so much professionally or outwardly, but we have some really great like car singing parties with my children. It's not something that I have too much time for on my personal life, but I still really enjoy when the opportunity arises.
Yeah.
And catch me at a karaoke somewhere once in a while.
Oh
And
my
that
gosh. That's what we should have done for this. Just had a full on
right?
karaoke session. That would have been awesome. Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so you are at Smarsh, and I want to start with that because I want to talk a little bit. You joined at a really pivotal moment where there was a big acquisition, you had a big CEO change. What was it like kind of walking into that with no internal comms, these big things happening? Talk a little bit about that experience. And remember that our listeners, some of them are also probably potentially walking into big changes in their organizations as well.
Yeah, I think organizations that maybe don't have internal comms focus on bringing in internal comms when they are going through periods of change, because internal comms to me really acts as that connective tissue and that steady hand when there's turmoil in the business or there's turmoil in the market. You can look to comms to provide the information that people need to understand not just what's happening, but why it's happening and how that affects their day to day. I lean a lot on the know, do, feel principle of like, what do I want people to know? How should they react? What's their next step, their call to action? And going back to that emotion piece, right? What do I want them to feel? Confident, excited, etc. And so when I joined Smarsh, I was actually making a career shift. It was one of my steps along my career journey from having been in more traditional marketing and communications, but often with an internal sort of like flavor. But this was my first big internal comms focused only role as well. And so I learned alongside the organization a little bit. And what was the most important to me starting out was understanding the state of the state. And so listening to the various folks in the various departments and understanding, okay, what are we doing now? What's working? What's not working? And what's happening? And I had maybe like 2 months of that scenario before it was, okay, acquisition is going to close. Okay, we're going to have a new CEO. And so
Oof.
I had to go fast. I had to build my foundation fast
Yeah.
and then pivot alongside the organization while I was also building those foundational pieces of process and intake and sort of email platforming that the organization didn't currently have.
You must have had a skill of immediately building credibility, because to be in such a new role for you, right? I mean, I think the principles you probably had from your past life, I can imagine that internal marketing, that kind of broad communication. But
Yeah.
when how did 2 months in and you've got this massive transformation and it's just you still at that point, right? Just
Yeah.
one person. Yeah. How did you build that credibility so fast so that they just brought you right in the room?
Yeah. So I would say I wasn't in the room right away. It happened over time a little bit. I was fortunate to have a leader and partners around me that were always keeping me informed and helped me build that credibility. So I have to say that it's important to have, good support around you. But again, I think it goes back to wanting to listen, and everybody wants to be heard, right? Every executive wants their thoughts to be heard. Every department wants to be heard. And people ultimately look for a partner and for help. And so that's how I try to position myself and comms is like, hey, I'm here to help you. What are you trying to do? Let me figure out with you alongside you how to achieve those goals. And it's kind of like a cyclical thing, right? The more, if you do good work, if you listen to people and you do good work and you promote and you produce and you're reliable, then you get invited into the conversation more. And then you continue to produce good work because you've got more information. So just getting over that first hump and then continuing to do the work, I think really helps to grow over years. And now it's 3 years later and I've built that foundation.
Well, and I know from doing our pre-interview a little bit that you really have started to grow your team as well. So you're not just that one woman show anymore. That just speaks to also kind of this trust that you must have built. But I'm curious, as you started to have the conversation for needing more bandwidth for expanding your team, how did you open that door to the conversation and get them convinced? Because you're now a team of three, is that right? Or
I'm a team of two, and I'm hoping that in the future, for anybody listening on the leadership team, that we're going to get maybe another one in the future. But you never know. Like you have to prove the value.
yeah.
Right. You have to prove that I'm doing all of this and I can't do this because I'm prioritizing XYZ. And so I built a little bit of a business case and I sort of like turned that around and shared. But really, it was a bit of an organic progression because I was doing a good enough job being visible to leadership and being visible in promoting my successes that they were able to also see the need alongside me. So I will say I didn't have to do much convincing. I have in a previous life had to work really hard with a business case to get approval for funding. So I do know that is a tough thing. But I will say, like, it's about being able to say yes and or no and, like, yes, I could do this and I really need a resource because XYZ. We also were fortunate, like the first or second year, we were able to make some pretty big strides in employee engagement and sentiment around trust in leadership and understanding of vision. So I had some data points behind the work that I've been doing in regular comms, in town halls, in streamlining into newsletters, in coaching executives in how to speak to some of the things that we were going through, and that really helped. So I think leaning on any data or metrics or successes is also helpful.
Yeah, I think that speaks really strongly to getting the ear of those who really care about data. Is you've got to bring them data and you've got to bring them kind of that consistency. You also talked about prioritization, which I think is all part of it, that kind of yes, and I can do this and I need this, or I can
Yeah.
do this, but I can't do it for 2 weeks because this is the list we already have, whatever it is. How do you decide on prioritization? Do you have a certain philosophy that you follow, or what is that philosophy?
Yeah. So Smarsh in general, we make sure that everything that we do ladders up into our core objectives for the year. And so we're actually, like, in our performance for the year, we have our goals and they all connect into the greater company goals. And so one of the things that I did over the last couple of years for comms was institute an intake process. So when a stakeholder comes to me and says, because we've all received this last minute request, right? Like, I need an urgent email to go out next week to all company. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. Why? Who? What? Purpose? And so I instituted an intake form and sort of like a little project brief where it requires folks to sit down and slow down and think about, what am I trying to achieve? So those questions like, what's the business objective? How does this ladder into one of our main objectives as a core? What's the message or the couple of bullet points? So that when I get something from a stakeholder, it's all ready to go and I'm not wasting time pacing things down. And often through that process, the stakeholder might learn or think, oh, wait a minute, I'm actually not ready for this because I haven't answered this core change management problem, or this process isn't completely ready. So that helped me not spin wheels on certain things. And then being able to say no, because we do have that sort of intake form and say, like, hey, this isn't ready yet. Let's pause and wait. Or this doesn't actually connect to one of the goals that we have. Let's maybe turn this from a all company email into like a Friday Teams feature because that's a more appropriate channel for it. So redirecting a little bit.
That's really, I like that, where you're aligning your channel strategy along with your prioritization. That makes a lot of sense. One question we did not prep for this question, but one thing that came to mind, as a practitioner myself, one of the things that I struggle with is doing all the things you're talking about, tracking everything to goals, having strong prioritization. But one of the things that always tends to happen is you're in the weeds doing the work, that sometimes we forget to at the end of the quarter or the end of the half year, kind of roll it up to actually articulate the story of the impact we had. How do you make time for that? I call it all like the housekeeping work that we have to
Yeah.
do. When do you do the housekeeping work that we have to do?
I don't do a great job of it, to be very honest. That's one of my key
Me either.
improvement plans for myself is like when it does come to review time or QBR time, having to be like, oh, crud, what did I do? Because you feel so busy and then you're like, what actually got delivered? So yeah, I mean, I keep track. We use Lattice, which I actually like have
Oh,
no reason
interesting.
to plug this tool, but I really like it. And so you can make your one-on-one notes, and it also connects with our performance management
Yes.
format.
Yep.
Well, tied with that because the performance management team and the talent team is like my buddy and my partner in comms crime.
Yeah.
But we use that. And so I do end up having like a running list in my one-on-ones with my direct report and with my leader and with others in the business. So I can go back in there and I lean on that. But to your point, I need a better method.
Well, I mean, and I think that brings me to just, before we kind of talk about comms as like just the overall strategic partner, I think these are some of the things that we as comms people need to be thinking about that are added value, right? This housekeeping stuff that we're talking about, there's some people that's their whole job, right? Maybe they're the ops person for a team. And so, when I talk about my dream internal comms or employee experience team, I always have an ops person for this very reason, because often when you're in a team of two, it's hard to kind of keep up with all that. We also use Lattice here at Simpler. We not in the same way, but familiar with that tool. And I think the big word that I always talk about is just orchestration. And I always want to be able to share the whole orchestration picture, including the outcome. And it's hard to do. So I'm always curious just if people do that. I can imagine as we talk about sort of the admin parts of our job, there's that whole bucket. And then certainly on the other side, right, you kind of put that into the bucket of we're taking orders, or, you're filling out the intake form, and then we're taking an action. On the other side, and it sounds like you've been really good at this at Smarsh, have really positioned yourself as the advisor, as a strategic partner. How did you get to that point? Is there anything in particular that the listeners could take and do themselves?
Well, I mentioned earlier the concept of listening. I think I naturally lean a little more towards being a connector and an empathetic ear. And so I might take on a little more conversation and weight than I necessarily need to in a workplace. But I also find that really helps to build relationships. And it's genuine for me, like building genuine connections with the people that I work with, the people that I support. And being thoughtful and clear in how I communicate myself and my ideas, right? So like, even though we're rushing around and everybody's busy, I try to take a step back and be calm and not rush to a decision or rush to a response to things. And I think that gives me the space to show and to come prepared to these meetings with execs or meetings with C-suite of like, okay, she's got it under control. She's calm. She's polished. It's a little bit, you think about it like the actions, right? You're going to provide deliverables. You're going to provide good, high quality work that meets the goals of the person that you're providing that to. But you're also going to show up in a way that is giving that professional demeanor of like, I am a director. I am in this seat for a reason. So it's a bit of like maybe marrying that confidence and a little fake it till you make it too, especially in a role. Like you're like, okay, I know what to do. I'm here. But you got to that you got there for a reason, right? And you're there for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, and it's fun, bringing it back to kind of your start in arts and create in opera.
Yeah,
you have to show up. You have to be very calm and clear, and I think that's many performing artists are the same way, right? You're trying to again get something really clear. I also just love that, what you were talking about to me is a lot of advocacy. It sounds like you're just constantly building relationships across every level. And I think that does make a huge difference. Most of the comms people that I've ever met have a real skill, and most of them are empaths, but they have the ability to listen, which you've said a lot of times so far, listening, but not just performative listening, but listening and remembering the little things so that when you're in that room, you can advocate. I think that's a part of the job that I love the most. I don't know, being able to really advocate for the people. I also just like what you said again about being calm, cool, and collected, showing up like you know what you're doing, because the truth is you do know what you're doing. Now, the situations are going to certainly change, but you've got a plan, you've got a strategy, you've got your channels, you're doing all that work ahead of time. So you know to come in with a really consistent plan. I think that's
And
pretty awesome. I also, it's funny, I don't know how you feel, Sarah, about this, but it feels like there's a lot of connectivity no matter what industry or organization that you're in. People are people, and I think we have the same issues everywhere. Would you agree?
I would 100%. I think the skills that got me into performing arts, that got me into arts program management, that got me into marketing and comms, that got me into internal comms and brand, they're all the same skills, right? It's all
Right.
about thinking strategically, building process, listening to people, understanding connections, and being, like you said, being a human. And I think that anybody who has those skills, that's why when I coach people on what kind of a job do they want, like young career folks, people looking for that next step, I always ask them to take a step back and think about, what do you like to do? What makes you feel good in your current job? Not like, I want to be a marketing coordinator, or I want to be in IT, but like, what are the actual things? Because that's the stuff that you can pick up and take anywhere. And then the possibilities become even greater. So yeah, I mean, clearly I really like really like what I do. And I really like talking about this connective tissue sort of experience with comms. And so
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for that opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. And so you've just talked so much about how you've built that credibility, and you kind of came in as that team of one and really started from scratch essentially. And as the company has grown, I think you've described it a little bit as going from like a teenager to a little bit of a more mature, young adult, let's say. How did that evolution happen from the comms perspective? What are some of those actual things that you saw and you thought, gosh, we are maturing from that comms lens?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So when I joined, we had a lot of different comms coming from different departments. There wasn't really a set template. Things didn't look the same. We didn't have that email platform. So that was one of the first things that I instituted, right? Was once I did my listen and learn, was okay, how can I reduce the noise? How can I streamline our comms? And how can I get it all onto a platform that is trackable and measurable and that has some consistency so people know what to expect? And from there, I started moving into the intake process of, okay, what's the message? So get the foundation and then start to strengthen the actual content.
Yeah.
And over time, what I have found is that more people come to me first, and folks are asking for help, and folks are saying, hey, I have a problem I need to solve, or a communication campaign my C-suite wants me to run. Can you help me? Instead of just saying, hey, I need you to send this. And so that's been my major marker, right? Is that
Yes.
people come to me, and my answer is always, thank you so much for coming to me. I'm excited to partner with you. Let's set up some time. So constantly having that open sort of like position too continues to
Yeah.
have come back and come back.
Well, and you're reinforcing that so that when their colleague has a similar thing, they're just going to say, "Oh, just go talk to Sarah. She'll help you
Yeah.
work through it," as opposed to just go and she'll get it out for you. I really like that. It is crazy to me how much these relationships, the relationships that you build, the credibility that you build in relationships carry in so
Yeah.
many other ways. It helps you to get things done faster. I love that that's a sign of maturity for you all, because I could see that. I think once you've got a functioning team that is really has a clear set of strategy and has an impact, then people are going to come to you. And I like what you said, that open stance, being open and available. It's kind of the only way to be in our roles. I feel like you got to be kind of open, because you never know what's coming.
Yeah. And I really liked what you said earlier about the building relationships. And I had a thought, like, it's not just about building relationships with that one maybe executive member that is a little hard to reach. It's about building relationships with the people around that person and who
Yes.
support that person. And then knowing, so there's some political work to be done too, right? Knowing who is going to be an influencer for your influencer. So And sometimes that can be overwhelming and
Oh,
tricky, but it's also a lot of fun once you start. And it again goes back to you build relationships with people, even if there isn't an end goal with that person, because one,
yeah.
it's a nice thing to do. And two, you never know how that's going to serve your greater function in the future.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like creating in past lives when I was at GoDaddy and had a big, big organization. I felt like what I was doing was essentially figuring out who their board, each executive's board was. Who are they consulting? And it always inevitably was their EA, always had incredible insights. You could figure out who their right hand person was, and you win them over as well, digging in, making sure you get their perspective. But I call it like the collective board. Every executive has got it, and usually it's the layers below them versus any layers above them. And so I think that's a really good approach, is when you're getting a new executive in your organization or a new voice that you really need to start amplifying, find out who's around them and influencing them, so that yes, you can play the political game a little bit and influence them as well, but it becomes real once you've built the relationships, I feel like. I know one thing we share in common is running town halls for our organizations. And I know that I think very early on, when you'll have to tell us in Smarsh, you created this huge global event called Smarsh Forward. Will you just first tell us a little bit about what it is, what the intent was, and then I want to learn a little bit about it and what others can take from it.
Yeah, so it was our first one was in 2024. And it was the first time that we had all gotten together since COVID. And so it really was a bringing back of people.
Mm,
And we had also recently transitioned to a hybrid work model. So it was really a year of connectivity and rebuilding community and getting our folks together. So we did one Smarsh Forward. We had two separate events. One was in the US and one was in APAC in Bangalore. And we split our 1,200 person audience into those two regions based on what made sense regionally. And so it was really a 2-day alignment and connection event, right? We had keynote speakers, we had presentations on company vision from our CEO and our CFO and our product and our customer success teams. We did it all. We had some service events. We did a Build a Bike event to,
oh, that's
sort of,
cool.
yeah. And we actually were able to present to the kids. I didn't get to go to the Bangalore event, but in the US event in Atlanta, we were able to present
Oh,
the bike to the kids and the families at the end. Of course, I was only there for 2 minutes because running an event, I was running all over the place.
yeah, of
But I
course.
see some of it. And we had some, we had some dinners and we had some team building offsites and things. And we had some executive team meetings too. So we were able to get that body of leadership together to do some strategic planning. And really, I really feel like that was the catalyst for the year. It really set
Mm,
the tone, having that sort of annual kickoff. Our sales teams and our customer success teams, they held their individual team kickoffs immediately after in the same space. So it was just this week of rolling connection and alignment for the year.
yeah.
So we did that all in person in 24. And then in 25, just this past January, we pivoted and we did it hybrid. And so we had it in our office location, right? So do it for the first time all in person,
Oh
and
my
then do it for the
gosh.
first time all hybrid. And then next year we'll see. We're hoping to be back in person again. But yeah, man, like event planning and comms
Oh,
could be a full-time role. And in my dream team, I've got a full-time headcount for event.
oh my God. That's a really good point, because you're thinking about the content and getting everybody aligned. And then there are all of the logistics of having employees together in person. Like, what are they going to eat? And what are they going to wear? And where are they
How
going
are
to
you
show
going to
up?
manage all of their travel and their hotel
Oh
accommodation?
gosh, yes, exactly. Pour one out for all the event people that I know. That is one job where just incredible people who do such a hard job, and it is one I am not ever wanting to do on my own. That is for sure. Oh, that's interesting. So let me ask you this, because I've done events like this myself, and I've seen events done really well, and it does start that momentum. How do you keep the momentum from one Smarsh Forward going throughout the year? Are there other touch points where you're bringing it in,
Yeah.
reminding of it?
100%. So the themes that we let's think about that 2024, because that's a whole year in completion and we can look at it. The themes that we introduced in the in-person event, we did carry through. We carried it through in all of our quarterly all staff meetings going forward. We touched on it in all of our, regular sort of Q&A town halls that we have periodically throughout the year. And I incorporated it. So I took really careful care to incorporate it into every comm that I wrote. Right. And then it also went into my intake form, right? So those themes are the things that I wanted people to ladder into when they were thinking about, how am I going to promote this activity in my organization, in the product org? Well, how does it connect to those themes that we introduced? So we really did embed it in everything that we did in 2024. We're doing the same thing now in 2025.
I really like your addition to your intake form. One of the ways that we do something similar at Simpler, in our editorial calendar, every single tactic we take, every activity has to align to one of the company goals or to one of our sort of culture building activities for the year. So I think being really intentional. We started the conversation a little bit with that housekeeping. That's a perfect example of making it easier for yourself, getting that set of reminders that when you've got this big cultural moment that you feel like is going to be a catalyst to the whole year, that you think it through so that you can incorporate those pieces and reminding people. I think it's a little bit subliminal, but the more you say it in front of people, the more they connect to that experience and they have a positive emotion. So that sounds like an incredible event, and we do an annual kickoff. But I'm loving the direction you're talking about. I think that's a really smart strategy to get everybody kind of going. We are shockingly getting close to time, which is hard to believe. But I want to hear two other kind of things for you. First, where do you get your inspiration when it comes to internal comms? What are you reading or thinking about when you're not in a work moment related to the job?
Well, I spend a little too much time probably on LinkedIn. I'm more of a lurker than I am a poster, which for someone who's also in charge of employer brand is probably another improvement point for me. I'm really good at telling other people how to do things and not very good at following my own advice. But I feel like that's the curse of the internal comms person. You're kind of behind the scenes and you're used to it. And then but I follow a lot of internal comms sort of teams and thought leaders. I read the Simpler blogs and articles. I follow Joanna Parsons. And so I'm just constantly reading and picking up tidbits, and I kind of treat it the same way I treat the relationship building, right? Like you never know when information is going to be useful to you. So I like to take in more and then filter out, because I know my brain will recall what I need eventually, whether it's subliminally or not.
Yeah.
So I maybe don't even take note of what I'm reading, but I see it and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm going to follow that, or I'm going to think about that. And I've been doing a lot of digging into AI lately. We could have a whole nother conversation about that, but it's definitely starting to make my life significantly easier in the workplace. So I'm always looking for, thought leaders on AI and new ways to use it in comms.
That's awesome. Yeah, we are always talking about AI here too. And it is, I really, you actually articulated it perfectly for the way my brain works. I get a lot in and then it naturally feeding it out and deciding what to use. That's really good. And I think the last thing, thinking back when you were starting out your career, and obviously you started not in a comms role, but what would you go back and tell yourself? If you could just reflect, what would you say about where you are today and the role you have?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I would tell myself to feel a little less anxious and stressed, that things are gonna work out, right? When you're young in your career, you think you have to have it all sorted out. Even it starts with college too. It's like, pick your degree, pick your major, pick what you want to do for the rest of your life. And that's so not the case. So I would tell myself that, and I would tell, I was chatting with a friend's daughter who wants to go into school for marketing and isn't sure what to do. I was like, whatever you do, you can find another logical path. You can turn it into something else. And so I think I'd tell myself that it's going to work out, and you'll find a space where you really feel like it meets you where you are. And I do, honestly, I feel like getting into internal comms, it's the type of job, it's the role, it's the function that I was meant to be doing. And so I feel really grateful to have been on that journey, even though it was a little, hodgepodge up and down here and there.
I think they mostly are. I think that's what makes us unique and good at our jobs. Sarah, where can people find you and also information about Smarsh?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. Sarah Jane Kaplan, I think, is what I come up under. And Smarsh, you can go to smarsh.com, learn more about Smarsh and communications intelligence and regulatory software, which is what we do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining. I love your background and I love the conversation.
Thank you. I had a great time and I appreciate all your time as well.